Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Pitchmasters with me, your host, Danny Fontaine. This week I speak to yet another one of my all-time pitching heroes, the legendary Peter Coughter, founder and CEO of Coughter Company, professor at VCU Brandcenter, and author of one of my favourite books, The Art of the Pitch. In this episode, we discuss a lot of pitch material, the fear that we all have, whether we need a deck, bringing the right people, and breaking the rules. But best of all, Peter is a natural-born storyteller, and this episode is full to the brim of pitch anecdotes that will make you laugh and make you cry. So sit back, grab a drink, and get ready to take some notes. Peter Coughter, what an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I'm a big fan of yours, but before I steal your thunder, I would love you to introduce yourself, to pitch yourself to anyone who may not have heard about you and your fantastic work.
Wow. Well, hello, Danny, and it's great to be here. Thank you. Thanks for thinking of me. I don't want to do my entire bio. I will just say that my involvement with pitching, it's a good place to start, is that I, with two other fellows, we started an advertising agency in Richmond, Virginia, where I live. And we had no accounts, no business, no revenue, we had no furniture. We had nothing. And what we had to do, we quickly realized, is to go into rooms and convince people who did not know us, who'd never heard of us, up against much better, tougher, well-known, better funded competition to give us their money. It's a big ask, as people say. And the only way that one can do that is to be so compelling and so powerful in that room that they are willing to take what is quite literally a chance on the idea that maybe something extraordinary can happen if we go with these new guys. And so that's how I got involved in it. We got very good at it. We were able to grow the company quite successfully. I left after 20 years, and because I had developed a bit of a reputation at being good at this sort of thing, started doing my one-man consultancy. Some of the stories from the book come directly from that consultancy work. And about the same time, I began to teach at what was then known as the VCU Ad Center, Virginia Commonwealth University, which is here in Richmond, Virginia. And we started it and from scratch with a wonderful, wonderful woman who was actually a former employee of mine named Diane Cook-Tench. And she led the school, and she asked me to come aboard as an adjunct to see if I enjoyed doing it. So I did, and I asked her, what do you want me to teach? It was pretty much a pirate ship. And she said, I don't know, whatever you feel like.
Right.
So I gravitated towards trying to help students sell their work and learn more about presenting and ultimately learn more about themselves. So that's too long, I know, but I tried to compress it.
No, that's perfect, because that's a game of two halves. We're going to talk mainly, I think, about the first half, the pitching stuff, but I'm interested to know, what was it like moving from the fast-paced, cutthroat, thrill ride, depressing hellhole of pitching into kind of education and that kind of regular life?
Well, I never really moved so much. I did these things simultaneously. In fact, when I started the company, I would travel. You travel all around the world.
Right.
I've been fortunate enough to do so as well. But I would travel, leaving Richmond on Sunday, returning on Wednesday, teach school on Thursday and Friday, relax on Saturday, and travel again on Sunday.
Right.
And that was week after week after week. And that got a little tiresome, by the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not doing that anymore.
Good.
But and another thing, I think at the heart of your question is that yes, advertising is a soul-sucking business, and yes, it's a wonderful thing if you can work for yourself. You know, it was a big difference to have our name on the door
Right.
of the agency. But in the consultancy, I don't have to be in advertising. I just talk about advertising with the people who have to live it day to day. So I rather like that.
Right. And so
Does that make sense?
it makes total sense. Yeah. I actually, before I did it the other way around. Before I got into all of this, I used to be a lecturer at university. So for me, it's been a
Ah,
complete kind of opposite, actually, with a bit of a crossover as well. But there you go. So pitching, what I'm interested in, first of all, so your book, you've mentioned it already. It's called The Art of the Pitch. And I want to just say it out loud, because if you haven't read it, you've got to go and read it. I've read it multiple times. It's full of anecdotes and real tangible advice. And you've just mentioned starting up the agency. Did it go well in the first, but how did your first pitch go when you had no clients? Did you figure it out straight away?
no, no. And that's something yes, you're chuckling because you know what that can be like.
I do.
We made every mistake known to man,
Right.
every possible mistake, and we tried like hell not to make them twice. You
Yeah.
know, we learned tremendously from that, and those became a cornerstone of my teaching and
Mm,
my philosophy about presenting. You know, don't do this. Whatever
right.
you do, don't do that. So that's, yeah, we made mistakes. And the first major win that we had a just a remarkable, wonderful prospective client who put us into the pitch, as I said before, against we were in against J. Walter Thompson,
Right.
which at the time was the brand name in advertising, you know, in Madison Avenue. And we're here in Richmond, Virginia, three guys nobody ever heard of.
Yeah.
But they put us in there and they believed that we might just have something. And so we went through multiple pitches just when we think, oh, that went well, we've won. No, all we had won is the opportunity to come back another time.
Been there.
Yeah, and that was very helpful to our cause, actually, because we got better.
Right.
We learned more about them as people, which is tremendously important. I mean, that's something we can talk about for some time. We learned about them as people, and they learned about us. And lo and behold, they began to like us. You know, I have people say, well, the reason that we're here today is, you know, not to the client, but they're in meetings, they'll be going, okay, here's what we got to sell this work. We
Mm,
need to sell this work. Well, that may be the result of a successful presentation, but it's not how you win the presentation. The number one goal that I have for any presentation is to connect.
hmm
And the way we connect is emotionally, not objectively. And a lot of people don't want to hear that because it flies in the face of big data, if you will, and
Right.
all that sort of left brain thinking that predominates in the business world. But it is creativity and connection that carries the day. It just is.
And so, how do we begin to build an emotional connection with a client whom, at least at the beginning, are strangers to us?
One of the most extraordinary opportunities I ever had in my business career was that I was asked by the city of Boston, Massachusetts, about 10 or 12 years ago now, to help them pitch the International Olympic Committee on choosing them as the host city for the 2024 Summer Olympic Games.
Wow.
People say, what's the biggest pitch you've ever been involved in? Well, that's it by a mile because it's not millions of dollars, it's billions
Right.
of dollars that are at stake. So I will try to boil this down a bit. The first step was to win over the USOC, United States Olympic Committee, because their job is to choose one American city to go to Europe and to pitch against the European capitals. We were in it. I didn't get involved in the very beginning. I got involved. I was brought in when they were in the final four. They went from 36, one of 36 cities down to four. The other three competitors were Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Three world-class cities, and Boston was feeling a little bit of a bit of an underdog.
Right.
Certainly, we were the underdog. But the only way I thought that we could, the things that I preached have worked, but more often than not. And so one has to trust oneself, and I couldn't be afraid of the moment, which isn't to praise myself. I just mean that I find myself in a room in Boston with, Paul Simon has a line about a loose connection, a loose confederation of millionaires and billionaires. Well, that's what this was. I mean, the entry, but the cost of entry was being a billionaire.
Right.
There were several billionaires on this committee. And of course, you've worked with people like that. They are all the smartest person in the world.
Yeah.
And they all know everything about everything.
Yeah.
Including advertising, including, everything. So I couldn't be intimidated by that. So I had to stand up for what I believed in. And I was able to win over the head of the whole committee simply by saying that, by telling the truth. And just by telling the truth in the meeting, he could see, all right, well, this guy actually does have some idea about what the fuck he's talking about, So flash forward. We're in the final four. We're in a meeting about a month before that meeting is to take place. Again, we're in Boston. And I turn to the 20 or so other people that are in the room and I say, what is the significance of the date that these people are coming to see us? And they said, let me say, what do you mean? Well, it's going to be, I don't remember the exact date, but so let's just say it was April 12th. And I said, okay, and what about April 12th? They said, I don't know, what the hell are you talking about? And I said, well, April 12th is 1 year and 3 days removed from the bombing at the finish line of the Boston Marathon.
Yeah.
And the room gets, of course, deathly quiet. And somebody says, well, that's one reason we can't talk about that. We cannot discuss that. And I said, no, we have to discuss that. And they said, why? And I said, because they are going to know about it. It's going to be on the front page of the Boston Globe every day. It's going to lead the 6 o'clock news every single day. These folks are going to be in town for a while. Plus, they're the U.S. Olympic Committee, the centerpiece of which is a marathon.
Right.
They know about the marathon. We got to find a way to deal with it. Because I'm thinking this could be, to answer your question, finally, this could be the way to begin to make an emotional connection, to tell a story that makes sense for where we're going. So then I did something that I urge everyone to do. It's a part of doing due diligence. I look for stories that individuals on our team may have. So I just asked the group, does anybody have a specific memory of an experience that day with regard to the marathon? And the chairman of the committee said, yes, I do. I was there. I said, whoa, okay. You and I are going down the hall to your office. We're going to talk about that. And you other guys just, talk amongst yourselves, right? And I get in there to his office and we start going back and forth, back and forth. It turns out that he hosts a party every year at his house, which is in the building that overlooks the finish line.
Wow.
On Boylston Street.
Wow.
So we got together, we talked, a month goes by, and the 5 people from the USOC show up. Now, they had conversations obviously before, but this is the first real, most of that, the cut from the long list to the final four was done pretty much based on the documentation, or written paperwork, et cetera, for the most part.
Mm.
They didn't really have any kind of emotional connection with our folks. So they walk in, they sit down. We've already done the good mornings, and the nervous standing around with the coffee cup shaking. You've been in that one too, I'm sure.
Oh,
Where the
hells
China
yeah.
is right.
I've spilled coffee all over the place before.
right. So they sit down and they start their clock. Mind you, they have a clock.
Right.
Because they can't allow anyone to have more time than
Mm-mm.
anyone else. So we have 2 hours. John, the chairman, stands up and he doesn't say, "Good morning. We're so happy you're here." He doesn't say, I love this one in advertising. "Good morning. We've got a lot of great work to show you." and right. And we can't wait.
Right.
But first, let's meet the team.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm done. I'm out.
We'll come back to introductions.
Out, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm just out.
Yeah.
Next, you're going to show me a fucking agenda.
Right.
No. We're not going to do that. John stands up instead and he says, "Today is 1 year and 3 days removed from one of the worst events in the history of the Commonwealth. A dark day in Boston, indeed in the United States. You all know what it was, the bombing at the finish line of the marathon. I was there that day. My house overlooks the finish line. Every year, my wife and I host a brunch on the patio overlooking the finish line with family and friends. And last year was no exception. We were there, friends were there, we were having a lovely time. It was a beautiful early spring day, crisp air, beautiful blue sky, everyone in a very good mood, watching thousands of competitors run up the street, some jogging, some walking, some racing, but all of them trying to get to the finish line. And it's just a really exciting, invigorating day. When suddenly we hear a loud noise. And we can't quite process what it is. The idea of an explosion didn't occur to us, but we saw smoke down below us, right below us. We saw smoke and some fire. And just when we started to get the idea that, yes, this is an explosion, boom, there's another sound, another explosion, just to the left of the first one. More smoke, more fire, people screaming, and people running everywhere. But the people weren't running away. They were running into the smoke and into the fire to see if they could help. Because that's Boston, and that's who we are. Later that afternoon, I called my friend Mike Sheehan over at the Boston Globe, and I said, "Mike, we've got to do something. We've got to do something to help the families that were affected by this, something to build up the spirits of the people in Boston, the people in the city, the whole region." And that was the day that the One Fund was born, known as Boston Strong. And last year we raised $87 million without ever asking for a penny.
Wow.
Because that's Boston and that's who we are. And he sat down.
Did he drop the mic or did he just put it down? Wow. I mean, yeah. I had shivers up my spine for all of that, basically. It's
yeah, now I hasten to say that may be a bit heavy. That may be a bit over the top. Because another thing, see, is that I really believe is if you are a considerable underdog, you've got to do something different. You've got to shake it up. So that's really a secondary point to the one that I want to make, which is to answer your question. That's how we forged an emotional connection. Because just as you felt what you were just feeling, those 5 judges did too.
Yeah.
And what one can do when one does that is change the emotional temperature, if you will, in the room. You've changed their expectations. You're
Yeah.
talking about something that they had no idea would come up. So their minds change. They begin to think on that emotional wavelength. I later found out. I mean, I've always known that making that idea of we just sit down and we click, we had a great connection, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there's actually a scientific, explanation for that,
Hmm.
and it's called neural coupling. And the data show that when a speaker tells a particularly emotional tale like that one, her brain waves change from the normal, and so do the brain waves of the audience to match the speaker's brain waves.
Right.
So that's when you really begin to make that connection. And then if you can carry that through as far as you can go, if you can make that thread live in your story, you can carry the day.
So let's hypothetically picture a listener listening to you now. Let's call her Jane.
Okay.
Jane's saying, well, that's great, Peter, but I live in the UK and nothing like that has ever happened to me in my life. I don't have a Boston Marathon story. I can't make that emotional connect. What do you say to her?
I say you have a story, you just don't think you do.
Right.
One of the things that I've enjoyed doing, this may sound like a digression, but it will eventually make the point. Uh, I've enjoyed really working with students on the art of interviewing, if you will.
Right.
And that's, as you know, that's just a presentation for yourself. Uh, and they all want to sit down and go, well, I was born in so and so,
Yeah.
and I love walks on the beach and cooking and traveling. No, 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 no. You got to tell them something that they will remember, something that will differentiate you from everybody else. And inevitably, I get the people like Jane who go, well, yeah, well, Danny has a great story. Peter has a great story, but I don't have a story. And then I will inevitably find out that she was born in Lithuania and raised by wolves,
Exactly.
but she just, right? She just doesn't think about that at all.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is find that for you personally.
Right.
But in terms of a story for your presentation, find something that is unexpected, something that connects with the audience. Again, another part of due diligence. Learn as much as you possibly can about these people. I said that earlier. Know them as people. When I work with one of my teams, again, on the due diligence idea, I want to know where they went to college. I want to know what their hobbies are. I want to know if they have children. I want to know anything I possibly can because, like that gentleman John, I might find out something that's really, really powerful. If
Right.
if I hadn't asked, if anybody didn't have a story, they never would have come up,
Yeah.
and there would have been no reason to talk about the marathon,
Yeah.
and we wouldn't have had that opportunity that we did.
And actually, that's reminded me. There's another story in your book actually about the military guys and the research that you
Oh
did.
yeah,
That's a good one.
yeah,
Tell me about that. I love hearing you tell stories.
yeah. That's an oldie but
Yeah.
goodie. You know, that that's play that's play the hits. We didn't come here to hear that. We came here to hear this. All right. Uh, um, we had an opportunity. Well, I'll back up. We, meaning me, learned about a presentation that was going to be happening in Washington, D.C., with one of the biggest advertisers in the city at the time. And I was very keen. to try to get my agency into it. So I contacted the person in charge. And he was a wonderful man, a really nice fella. And he just said, look, we don't know. We're not going to talk to anybody from outside Washington. And we're certainly not going to talk to someone from Richmond, Virginia. We just got burned. We had the aforementioned J. Walter Thompson as our agency for several years, and they wouldn't even leave Manhattan and come to see us. We don't want to continue with someone who's 100 miles away. And that's all it is 100 miles to
Right.
Washington. But I said, well, look, most of the work that you know about from us runs in Washington. We're more of a Washington agency than the rest of them are already. And between us girls, there was no agencies worth a damn in Washington anyway. But they didn't know that. They didn't know anything about advertising. And one finds that a lot,
Right.
don't we? Well, I just kept badgering this guy, and he said, okay, all right, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a shot. I'll give you a shot. We'll come see you. That'll be the first step. I said, I'll come to you. I'll come to you every single week if you need it. No, we're going to come see you. And I guess they wanted to do the all-important furniture check.
Right.
That one is so ridiculous, but that's convention, and they like to follow convention. And prior to that visit, I asked our head of research to find out about these. It was 4 men, no ladies, just 4 men. And he called up the client, and the client actually sent nothing less than a dossier on each of these individuals with photographs and complete bios, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I mentioned the college deal before. My research guy comes to me and goes, Peter, look at this. This is what I found. This fellow went to West Point and served in Vietnam. This guy went to the U.S. Naval Academy and served in the Navy, not in Vietnam, but in the Navy in the Middle East. This guy was in the Marine Corps. This guy lists military history as his favorite thing to be involved in, his favorite hobby, military history and theater. He said, what do you think here? I said, well, I think I see a thread. And as luck would have it, at the time, and this is a long time ago, boys and girls, as luck would have it, the book, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, was enjoying one of its regular rebirths as a business book. And we had read it. And we used some of the teachings of the general to showcase case histories. Rather than saying we did this, we would couch it in terms of war. Well, that's why the day, again, it's always the day dawns.
Yeah.
They came, they sat down, clearly disgruntled, didn't like to be in the room. It was long enough ago that you could smoke in offices.
Right, okay.
And and 3 of them were smoking cigars, in blue serge suits.
Imagine.
So yeah, you get the image.
Yeah.
And I, this silly long-haired hippie, gets up in front of the room, and I don't even talk about advertising. I just say, I want to talk today about my favorite movie of all time. And they're looking at me like, oh my God.
Thinking we drove 2 hours.
We drove 2 hours for this? What? A movie? Holy shit, And I said, and that movie is Conan the Barbarian. And that gives them pause, as we say.
Yeah.
And they looked at me with, well, okay, maybe this won't be so terrible.
Might not be boring, at least, right?
It might not be boring, And my favorite scene in that movie takes place around a huge campfire at the camp of a general, like a Kublai Khan, a Genghis Khan type general. And it's a big festival, a big celebration. people eating, drinking, dancing. And Conan is invited to join the party. And he's sitting on at the left hand of the general. And the general at one point turns to his son, who's on his right hand, and says, "Tell me, my son, what is the greatest feeling in the world?" And his son says, "That's easy, father. The greatest feeling in the world is to ride bareback on my steed across the steppes and feel the wind blow in my hair." Okay, poetic, and the general really doesn't care for that one too much, and he turns to Conan and asks him, "Tell me, Conan, what is the greatest feeling in life?" He says, "The greatest feeling in life is to crush your enemy, to see him flee before you, and to hear the lamentations of his women." And that's how we feel about advertising. And that's why today's presentation is boom. At that point, a rear projected big
Right.
screen behind me comes up and says, "The art of war." They lean in.
Right.
They're all going, all
Yeah.
right, maybe this is okay. I get this. I like this. I like this. At one point in, the fellow who listed military history and theater as his hobby stands up and delivers the St. Crispin's Day speech from Henry V. It was just unfucking amazing. It was just
Wow.
unbelievable. And yeah, and it was over. We knew we had won. Why? Did we tell them anything about their business or that made it? No, nothing.
Right.
We just connected with them emotionally, showed them some stuff. Yeah, they don't know. Look, the clients don't know.
No.
Nobody knows. It's entirely
Right.
subjective. You can't just walk in and say great work speaks for itself. It doesn't. 1% of the time, maybe you'll look and go, wow, that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe 1%, if that. The rest of the time, you have to sell it. You have to. And when I use the word sell, and people, envision some used car salesman
Mm.
in a hideous plaid jacket, Herb Tarlick,
Yeah.
you know. Uh, that's not what I mean by selling. It's not. It's give your ideas a chance to win, to live,
Mm.
and do that by telling stories.
Wow, you unpacked a lot there. The research into the audience, the emotional connections, but also as a note to Jane, the listener, if you really can't find that story inside yourself, perhaps one that isn't relevant, then you have seen a movie or read a book or heard someone else's story that can be used metaphorically or however you need it to make that same compelling point.
Yes, exactly. And and clearly, we the average person walking into the room may not have even seen Conan the Barbarian.
Right.
We took a bit of a chance, but we knew because of the backgrounds of these four fellows that was highly likely that they had.
Mm.
And if they had, the connection with their military backgrounds would be profound. And it was. And we won.
You knew you had it in the bag when the St. Crispin's Day speech began, I
Oh,
assume.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's when you know.
That was just, I was looking at my colleagues like,
Yeah.
okay, anybody got a contract? And they went back to Washington and called us up and said, "You're our guys."
Right.
Now let's go back. Remember, we were not supposed to be in it.
Right.
We had to come. I said before, if you're an underdog, we had to come from way back in the pack. We would try to, and I suggest that people do this if they can. Try to evaluate your prospects.
Mm.
Like if we're an A going into this, they know us, they like us. We're an A. We're a B. They have a pretty good feeling about us, but the other guys, there's a favorite in there, and it's not us. We're a C. No, C's don't win.
Mm.
C's do not win.
Mm.
They certainly don't win if they play by the rules. They certainly don't win if they follow convention. You've got to change it up. And another point about you talk about things that were unpacked from that is we have to be committed. And by that I mean if we together as a team, whoever's on the team, working on the presentation, planning it, writing it, whatever, uh, we commit to what we're going to do. And that doesn't mean that we're saying the same thing word for word. In fact, I urge people to not memorize things, because you and I were talking before we went on it's not really the air, but about keeping things loose and conversational. And that's one of my biggest rules for presentations is make it a conversation. Only you're doing most of the talking,
Right.
but it needs to feel like a conversation. But once you start that conversation, even if you have put out this absurd premise of let me talk about one of my favorite movies of all time, you have to stay committed to it and go through with it.
Right.
Don't show any signs of weakness. Don't get second thoughts.
Right. Because then they
Or if you
will.
don't like that, we can talk about, no, you can't, you're
No,
dead.
exactly.
Right.
And it's interesting about learning lines or not, because I see it all the time, especially with younger people. They're rehearsing, but all they're doing to rehearse is trying to memorize every single word. And once they get in that flow in the pitch, the slightest disruption will throw them off. And then there'll be an actor on stage not knowing what to say next in the play. And it's not about that, but they feel like they must do that as a comfort blanket almost, because if I don't know exactly what the next word is, then what am I going to say?
My advice is that everything you know is wrong.
Right.
Everything you think you know about presenting is wrong. How are you going to keep it conversational if you're memorizing? And none of us, actors have to memorize their lines. They're supposed to do that. And I've seen actors try to present, and they're shitty. They're awful presenters.
Right.
Because they need the script.
Yeah.
I was involved in a project a few years ago. There's a little name dropping with Brad Pitt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a wonderful guy, very nice man.
Yeah.
And committed to this charitable thing we were involved in. But he had to get up and stand on his feet and talk about it to a group of people in a room, and he was completely lost. He just could not do it.
Right.
Couldn't do it. Yeah. If I had given him a script, he would have killed it probably. And
Yeah, because he would have acted it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But no, you cannot memorize it. You can't. You have to learn the ideas.
That's it.
You know the ideas. You have a few signposts, if you will, that you have to get to in order to get to your finish line, whatever that may be. But it can't be a rigid deal, because if it is, as you say, we're all going to lose our place. It's like, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Right.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed.
Right.
You're dead.
Yeah.
So, be relaxed, have fun, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But don't memorize. Don't ever memorize.
Yeah.
No.
And that should be music to your ears, because memorizing things is horrible. It just ups your own pressure on yourself, right? And that's the good news.
Right.
Don't memorize it.
That's one of the ironies of this whole thing, is that things that everybody thinks are true are simply wrong.
Right.
I've been working on this idea about the myths of new business.
Right.
And I think I touched on this first one before, is that we're there to sell our ideas.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're there to connect.
Right.
Oh, what the hell do you mean? You're there to connect. I mean, another way to think about that is that you're searching for the confluence of your brand, which is who you are, or your agency is, what you, and their brand. At what point do those brands come together and intersect? That's, if you can get to there, that's a lot more compelling than selling, look at this, huh? How about this? No. People say the best work wins. We've said that before. It doesn't. There's just so many examples of there's rooms full of really good work all over the world that never got sold. Great work speaks for itself. No, it doesn't. You've got to do the talking for it. You absolutely have to. And this is one of my favorites. We need to show them that we really understand their business and that we understand their business every bit, if not better than they do. That's bullshit.
That's
Excuse me. That's bollocks.
yeah. Oh, much better. Thank you. Yeah.
You are never going to know it as well as they do. And to suggest that you do is not only presumptuous, it's probably rude.
Right.
It's just,
It can have the
it's
absolute
just
opposite effect when you pretend to
of
try
what
and
you
come
think.
across.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then we need to tell them every single thing we know about the topic, about the problem, every single thing we know about the category
Mm-hmm.
in order to convince them that no, you do not. You only have to tell them whatever is necessary to tell your story.
Mm.
So there we go back again to what is the story. Here's another anecdote, but it's a story, isn't it? Um, I was working with one of my agency clients, and they came to me, and they were an incumbent. You and I
Right.
touched on this idea
Yeah.
a little bit before we came on here. And they were an incumbent, and they regularly earned $27 million in revenue
Right.
annually from this one
It's
client.
a nice gig.
That's a lot of money
Yeah.
in the advertising business.
Yeah.
And again, boys and girls, that's not billing, that's
Right.
revenue. And they said to me, we have to defend it, we have to keep it. Losing it is unconscionable because if we do, we've done the math, we have to fire 200 people. Oh, okay. So we began to talk about it on the phone. I hadn't yet gone to the city to meet with them, but we're talking about it on the phone, what we're going to do, and back and forth, back and forth. But they are, of course, are terrified, terrified, and it's entirely understandable.
Right.
Absolutely terrified. It's the biggest thing they've ever had to pitch, and it was their account already, but they need to hang on to it.
Yeah.
So, and then they're told, by the way, there's also another $15 million worth of new revenue in creative fees that the lucky winner will take home.
Right.
Okay. So I get to the town, which coincidentally enough was Boston, a Boston agency. And I said, all right, let's see the deck. Yeah, we can do an hour talk, Danny, on the decks.
How many pages how many slides? That's first of all.
I'm about to tell you. That's the right question, isn't it? Over 300 slides.
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
Yeah, over 300 slides, and it did not even include the speculative creative, which they were required to show.
Well, it's all supporting information.
Right. And what it was everything they knew about this particular subject.
Right.
And everything else that they
Right.
knew about anything in the world. Because if we leave that out, we may not win. And if we don't win, we're fucked.
Right.
We're going to have to fire little Johnny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand. I have sympathy for little Johnny. So let's not lose. Here's another thing we could talk about. The pitch consultant that was running the show, gave them a total of 3 hours, which is long for those things, as I think, at least in my experience, it's long. It's usually 2, but gave him 3, and he said, you can go for 2.5, 2:45, and then we'll do 15 minutes for questions. Yeah, right, fine. We can get to that idea in a minute. Don't listen to the pitch consultants. That's another subject. But so I sit down, I go through the deck. It takes me nearly 3 hours to just read the slides, not present them. So, I look at them and they look at me and they're like, they're kind of sheepish.
Do you like it?
Yes, it's thorough.
Yeah.
That's quite thorough, yes. It's quite thorough, thank you, yes. Oh, God, no, this can't work. We cannot possibly do this. And let me tell you why. And then, God bless them. talk about having courage. They said, okay, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to start cutting, and we're going to start figuring out what it is we really need to tell them. What do we really need to say in order to carry the day, in order to win this thing? And we have to go first. Now, first is not a bad position. It's not as good as last,
Right.
as you know. But first, when there's 4 other agencies presenting after you, is a little tough to maintain that emotional connection all the way through those other presentations. So when they finally did the show, which was quite an extraordinary staged event that we put together, I loved it. It was showbiz.
Right.
We did it in their. It was the Bank of America, the biggest,
Right.
one of the biggest banks in the world, in their boardroom, and we blacked out the entire room, et cetera, et cetera. You've seen that sort of thing. It was quite theatrical, but the point of the story is that the deck was now 21 slides.
Right.
21 slides, and it took them 1 hour and 17 minutes to go through it. And to make a long story short, we won. We carried the day.
Right.
We did. So it's just such dramatic proof that you don't need to tell them everything. You just need to tell them what they need to hear to say yes to you.
It's so true. And one of the things I see time and time again is we've got 2 hours or we've got 3 hours. So let's map out 2 hours or 3 hours. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And then no matter what happens, damn it, we didn't have time for the last 5 minutes because everything goes slower than you think anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Whenever I get to an agency, particularly for the first time, I'll ask them what happens when you're told you have 2 hours. Well, we get to figure out how we're going to fill 2 hours.
Right.
So we know we're completely screwed up at that point. And I said, then what happens? We start on the deck.
Yeah.
How do you start on the deck when you don't know what you're doing yet?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't even need a deck.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, you got to have a deck. And decks are hard to do. They take a lot of time. So you got to get started. And these is, ostensibly intelligent people.
Exactly. They just don't know any better.
And they operate from a position of fear.
Right, that's it. And it comes back to similar to remembering your lines, that your deck is your safety blanket. Because no matter what happens, I'm going to have everything on the slides behind me. So the main thing I need to do is get through them. And then the pitch word finished. Yes. And then, once the pitch is finished, we can all leave.
And we can go have a cocktail.
Exactly.
Yes. Oh, God. You're stealing my words. So many. I often say, I see a person whose idea of a great presentation is getting through her part of the deck without getting hurt.
Exactly.
I did my 5 minutes, and then she sits down and has no idea what else is going on in the room, nor does she even know anybody else's part.
And she doesn't care.
No, doesn't care, and thinks that she's doing the right thing for her team.
Right.
You got to know everybody's part. You need to know the whole thing backwards and forwards. And you can't. Another one I love is that we need to send enough people to match up with the people on the other side.
Right.
They're going to have 8 people because they've got the district head of marketing, and then they have the head of the DEI, and they have the. No, you don't. You need to send enough people to tell your story.
Yeah.
You keep going back to that, right? To tell your story well and effectively. That's all you need to do. Well, we need to have the head of something. No, you don't. Again, some of this stuff is just going to be really iconoclastic to your listeners, but one big pitch that I was involved in with one of my clients, we did our due diligence that I referred to a couple of times. And because we had somebody on the inside, you often have someone on the inside.
Right. You should, if possible, right?
Yeah. They told us, oh, by the way, they hate your chairman. What?
Huh.
They hate him. Well, if we didn't know that, we would have walked in with him leading the charge.
Right.
So it fell to me, the outside guy, the consultant, to go to the chairman and say, oh, by the way, Mike. They hate you.
Yeah.
You can't be in it.
Right.
And God bless him. He said, okay, I get it. How can I help?
Mm.
And so he helped. He was very smart, very savvy
Mm.
business person. He helped a lot. And he was a big enough man to know I don't have to be in the room.
Yeah.
And we won that one too.
Yeah.
But we would have lost if probably would have lost if they had to sit there and look at the guy they hated.
Yeah. And it comes down to fear again, I think. I mean, I've been in
I
pitches
think so.
where there's 3 people client side and we still bring 8 because
Right.
and it's almost like fielders in cricket or baseball. You never know where the ball's going to land, so we got to bring everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember going to an agency once and I said, well, how many people did you bring to the last pitch? 12. And I said, well, I can play American football with less than that.
Exactly.
You know, what the fuck were they there for? Well,
Yeah.
no.
Most of them
And you
wouldn't have
only
even
send
spoken a word, probably.
no,
Right.
no. And you only send great presenters.
Yeah.
There's another rule. Most agencies don't do that. You can only send your best presenters. Yeah, but we got to send the head of analytics. Maybe not. Maybe not. You know, unless she's a great presenter, then we send her.
Right.
And she doesn't talk just about analytics. She tells our story.
Mm.
You know, quit breaking everything up into silos.
Mm.
There's another idea, you know. Oh, I'll be running the account, and I'm here today. I'm pleased to say that we have a wonderful team with us. And now here's Bob, your strategy director. And Bob gets up, you know, and it's
Yeah, he talks
it's
about
bullshit.
strategy. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and
Yeah.
his personal philosophy on strategy is quite fascinating. Oh, shut up.
Yeah.
Tell me something I want to know about, you know.
So, well, one of the things I'm really fascinated in, and perhaps I'm fishing for another anecdote here, but not necessarily. I don't have one in mind this time. So, you know, say whatever you feel like. But we've talked about disrupting, and we've mentioned it, and we've mentioned theatre, and we've mentioned not even having a deck, which is crazy for some people. Do you have any do you have any experiences of something far more experiential that's worked or perhaps failed, you know, creating an experience rather than relying on slides, information, stories, presentation, here you go?
Yes, yes. By the way, before I answer the question,
Yeah.
because I do have a good story for that, a good anecdote at least. I was on a podcast a couple of years ago. Uh, I did this guy's podcast twice. Interesting dude named Mitch Joel.
Mm.
He said to me at one point, well, your idea of a really good deck is the same as mine, Peter. I said, yes, meaning that without you in the room, it would be unintelligible.
Mm.
Meaning if I use a deck, it's all visual.
Right.
Every now and then there'll be a word, but that's about it. You know, every now and then, but for the most part, it's all visual. The less you put on a slide, the more you can say. You know, you've got an image of an orange, a piece of fruit on the wall behind you, you know, a huge orange. You can talk about anything.
Right.
You don't have to remember your line. You know?
Right.
We talked on this about, you mentioned this before, people use the deck as their outline, their Cliff's Notes, you know? And then again, of course, there's the people who just stand there and read the deck.
Right.
And they should be taken out and shot, you know?
But it also, especially
people still get away with that.
Think about the orange, you know, it not only gives you all of the stuff you've just said, but it also elicits this sense of curiosity in the audience as well. And that is a very powerful thing if we can achieve it.
Yes. Well said. I mean, if we can have that reaction, as you just explained, which is, or described, oh, I wonder what they're going to talk about here.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Because most people, think about it, they really don't want to be in the presentation. They don't want to see it.
No.
And people don't go to something hoping it sucks.
Right.
You know, they go to something hoping it's really interesting and new and different.
Yeah.
And enjoyable. And you're exactly onto it. But here's the experiential thing. with no deck. I was helping some friends in a small agency who were up against some big, again, a challenger agency, up against some big guys, and they were pitching the account of a National Basketball Association team.
Mm-hmm.
And in the States, the NBA is a big deal. We're in the championship finals right now, by the way. And the opportunity to represent one of the 30 teams in the league is a big deal. So what are we going to do? And again, how are we going to be a little bit different? Well, there was something really obvious that this agency, some of you may figure out who it is from this, but this agency actually has a basketball court inside it.
Right.
And I said, well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the presentation on the basketball court. We're not going to do it in the conference room.
Please.
And we're going to put bleachers in there. We're going to put them in the bleachers. And we're going to be on the other side like we're on the benches and come over and talk. And then somebody, I don't think it was me, somebody had the great idea. They said, well, how are we going to start it? You always talk about having a great opening, Peter. I said, yeah. I got it. We will lower from the ceiling an American flag because it's typical to play the national anthem before professional basketball and any professional sporting event. So we lower, they're sitting in the stands. We lower the American flag. A little 10-year-old boy walks out onto the middle of the court, turns to the audience, and sings the Star-Spangled Banner, which is our national anthem.
Yep.
They're overwhelmed. They're charmed. They're going, wow, this is really, really interesting. This is unlike anything we expected to see.
Especially a 10-year-old as well. That's got an extra layer of emotion.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Bringing children into this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't want to bring, you don't want to bring a lounge singer in, to do it.
Right.
It was really, really good. And that set the tone for the whole thing. And that began the emotional connection and make them see. One of the things I think that is that the audience is evaluating you, of course, as an individual, as well as part of the team, but they're evaluating you, and they're evaluating the way in which your organization presents its ideas. Because if you do it in what we would call a creative way, I think it's much more likely for them to believe that you will handle their business in a creative way. But one of the things that happens when it becomes time for us to, ostensibly we're in a creative business, when it comes time for us to talk about it, we try to sound like them.
Right.
We try to sound like the business folks. Yeah. God bless them. I'm not denigrating them, but they operate their own particular way. Creative people tend to operate differently, but we put all that aside and pretend that we're just like them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they've already got them.
Right.
They need people who aren't like them. They need us. And you're not going to make them believe that if you continue to go in there and act like them.
Right.
And dress like them, behave like them, speak like them with their jargon.
Yeah. Here, let me ask you another question.
Sure.
What is the biggest car crash of a pitch you've ever been involved in?
Yeah. This one was so long ago, because this was in when I was running, we were in my agency, prior to me starting the consulting company. And we weren't long into it, probably about 10 years. So it's a long time ago. So long ago that the medium that we used to present was slides that were projected with a slide projector. Kodak carousel slide projectors. Yeah. Many of your listeners have no idea what I'm talking about at this point. Never seen them.
Just lost half the audience now. Yeah.
Yes, well, then, shall I switch stories? No, they might recall, if they were a fan of Mad Men, the famous episode called Carousel,
Absolutely.
in which Don does that magnificent presentation in the smoke-filled room using the carousel projector
And
that they were there.
nostalgia.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And talk about, I mean, that's a lot of what I preach, you know. That's why I was so happy to see that episode. He was using an emotional connection. You know, this is a man who was essentially emotionally dead,
Right.
which is one of the ironies of it. He
Right.
can't connect with his own family, but he shows images of his own family,
Right.
and everybody in the room sees their families
Mm,
and how they feel about it. So again, there's another example that illustrates what you and I have been talking about. At any rate, we had to use slide projectors. And we were putting on a big show because it was for the state of Virginia tourism board.
mm.
Virginia is for lovers, which we had done, and we need to refresh, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, we were against the people. Some people in the advertising community there will have heard of the Martin Agency, which is headquartered in Richmond, and excellent agency, quite successful. And they were the inventors of Virginia is for Lovers. They were our competition, along with two other agencies, for the state tourism business. We determined that we were going to use, see, this gets a little wonky, a little technical. We're going to use rear projection so that we could walk in front of the screen
Mm.
and the images would be behind
Right.
us, like General Patton with George C. Scott stands in front of the giant American flag
Yeah.
in the movie Patton. Like people in front of chroma key, you know, that's what it would look like.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we had a huge screen. The people running the tourism board had decided that rather than having the presentations at their offices or at the agency's offices, they would really level the playing field and rent meeting rooms in a hotel.
Right. Hotels are actually known for their AV expertise as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what's the first rule of presenting in a hotel? It's bring everything
Right.
your own.
Right.
Bring all your own stuff.
Yeah. Including a
Okay.
generator.
Well, that's absolutely true. We we had a giant screen, and we were going to have these wonderful images behind us, and we had 24 slide projectors.
Wow.
We also had a video projector. Well, there was such a thing, a video projector. And they were all hooked up to a computer and an operator who would be behind the screen. Actually, more of an overseer because it was all designed to work automatically
Right.
once it started. Well, we got in the next morning after having tested it out the night before, and lo and behold, if we kept the screen back where it should be, allowing room for the audience, the images on the screen would be about the size of a postage stamp. If you've ever dealt with these things, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You need throw distance. So in order to get the images as big as we wanted, or even close to as big as we wanted, we had to move the screen all the way up to the
Right.
point where the screen was about this close to the people. And there was barely room for me and my partner to walk in front of the screen and the people. And I'm looking down on the people like this. And it was just, that was horrible in
Right.
and of itself. But we get into it, and all of a sudden, the projectors start firing randomly. If someone used the elevator in the hotel, it triggered our projectors.
Wow.
We had, to your earlier line, we had a generator in a truck outside, parked in the street, cables run up into our room. The Martin agency also had their cable truck outside. It looked like we were shooting a feature
Right.
in the hotel. There was so much gear
Right.
around there. And it just went crazy. Images flashing. There was one word we wanted on the screen was execute. And it's going execute, 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 execute.
Right in their faces as well.
Right this close to them. And people are looking up at me like, oh, please don't hurt me. Just don't hurt me. This is an emotional connection.
Yeah, there you
yes,
go.
but not the one I sought.
This is the use of fear. Yeah.
It can be strangely effective, yes. And it just gets worse. The aforementioned research guy from my agency is often at the corner, leaning against the wall the way elephants do against baobab trees.
Yeah.
He doesn't realize that that's the light rheostat. So the lights in the room are going up and down, up and down, up and down, while the projectors are going execute, 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 execute. And we're trying to talk. Well, clearly this is an absolute unmitigated disaster.
Yeah.
But we don't stop.
Right.
I talked about commitment before.
Yes.
We don't stop.
Yeah.
We just keep going all the way through to our big finish. they're just thrilled to still be alive, and they get up and they leave.
Right.
And we're sitting around going, "What the fuck? Oh Jesus! Oh Jesus! That's the worst thing I've ever been involved in."
Wow.
So we slink back to our offices. And we're sitting in our offices, and oh my God in heaven, this was a great opportunity, and Jesus. And we get a phone call from the head of the tourism board. And she says, and she swore like a sailor.
Right.
She was a doctor, a PhD, Dr. Betty Diener, quite an extraordinary person. And she says, Peter, what the fuck was that? What do you think you were doing? What were you trying to tell us? And I try to give them, and she goes, yeah, just shut up. Just shut up. She says the Martin agency did even worse.
Wow.
They were next. We went to see them after you next door.
Right.
All their stuff fell apart on them. The difference between the two of you is you guys showed grace under pressure.
Right.
Therefore, I am going to advance you and give you an opportunity to try it again.
Wow.
And you have 1 week to try it again, either at your place or our place. You make the call. I'm going to advance you and one other agency. Martin's out and the other guys are out.
Right.
Come back and let your creativity soar.
Yeah.
She hung up the phone. Well, we went back. We did it. We simplified everything. We didn't have multiple speakers. We learned something. It was the first time that I did the entire presentation. Now, this is a team sport for the most part, right? Everybody, we do it with teams. But if you can limit it down to the point where there's very little chance for error by having just one person who can do it. It worked. It worked like us very well for us. And from that point on, that's how we did every presentation. Only one speaker. That's unconventional and crazy, I know, but it worked. Now, it happened to be me. It could have been a partner. It could have been someone else who was better than I was,
right.
But I was the guy who knew how to do it. And it worked.
Wow.
But, there's so many lessons that came out of that, Don't try to do too much. Don't try to dazzle them with technology. Don't fly too close to the sun, and keep it simple. Keep it simple. It doesn't mean you can't be elegant. I think elegance lies in simplicity.
Yeah.
Simple, clean. And we won the business. So
yeah.
And we had it. We had it for another 4 years. So it was good. We did some really good stuff and we were happy.
I hope you don't mind, but I did just cry with laughter at that story. Quite literally.
I don't mind a bit. I think that is quite a compliment.
I like that one. I'm looking forward to sharing that story with the rest of the world when we get there.
Well, if they, if anybody can ever understand the idea of slide projectors,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've actually done a lot of work personally with slide projectors because it was a bit retro, and this was before I was in the world of pitching. This was art installations and using all kinds of crazy carousels that you pre-program with cassette tapes and use silent clickers and things to kind of record onto these tapes. So I guess with these 24 projectors, you had to manually record the clicks at the right time to get them all to change as well. It's it's quite an undertaking, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. And it all came asunder.
Yes, unsurprisingly perhaps, but there you go.
It's a very funny deal now.
Right.
At that moment, not so much.
The fact you won it, though, is you must have had a good laugh about that yourself at the time, actually. Like, wow, can you believe that she just called us and said that?
Well, again, you see, I think that just illustrates that everything that we think we know about this stuff is wrong.
Right.
We advanced because we showed grace under pressure.
Yeah.
And then we won in the finals because we made a very simple connection with those people. And we made several of the judges in that room cry.
Right.
When you make them cry, you win.
On that note, then, what's the most emotional pitch you've ever been involved in?
I was working with the aforementioned Martin Agency shortly after I started my consulting business. And they asked me to work with them on some new business pitches. And this one particular pitch was for the account of what shall remain an unnamed tourist destination in the Caribbean. And we made it through the written part, the RFP filling out part. Again, there was a search consultant, a fellow who at the time was quite famous in that business named Skip Pyle. And we were one of the 5 finalists. And the final presentations were to be given at the offices of this tourism commission on the island rather. And so we went down a few days early, which was kind of a bit of a jolly. You could say a bit of a boondoggle. Yes, it was a bit of a jolly, but I was told that you're in charge. You're the pitch Ayatollah, which was a term the Martin Agency used. So go ahead and do it. Take the team down there and get to know the place. And we did that, and we did this, and we did that, and we did a whole bunch of things. We get a briefing the day before the final from Skip Pyle. And he says, look, here's the only things that I insist that you do. You must show us fully blown out, speculative, creative across every platform. Okay? Yes, sir, Skip, you got it. And I don't want any professional presenters presenting. I want the people who are actually going to work on the business to present. Those are the only 2 things that I insist upon. You got it? Yes, sir, Skip. Yes, sir. Okay. So you know what we did, of course. The day dawns, and we showed absolutely no speculative creative work of any kind. None. 0. We didn't do any advertising work at all. And no one who spoke that day would ever work on that account. I did the open and the close, and I didn't even work at the Martin Agency. It's the last time I ever appeared in one of the pitches that I was doing for a client, because I finally figured out this is a bit unprofessional,
right,
of my part. But okay, I did it. And my close was about the power of dreams. Not tourism, not the virtues of that island, not this, not that. The power of dreams. And there were 5 judges, and 4 of them were in tears.
Right.
And I knew we had won.
Yeah.
And in fact, they gave us the business in the room.
Right.
With other agencies still to present. And I said, no, I don't think you can do that. It's other people. No, we want to.
Yeah.
We want to give you our account. We want to work with you guys. Okay, fine. But let's thank you very much, Now, again, I'll repeat myself, well, to a certain extent. We did nothing that the search consultant told us to do. Nothing. And we won the business. He came up, so help me. He came up and said to us, best presentation I've seen in a long time. Way to go, guys. Everybody loves the winner, right?
And that's such an important lesson, and I struggle all the time to get people to believe me when I say this. Procurement, yes. Pitch consultants, clients, they will give you all sorts of parameters and rules that you must never break. And the way we win pitches is by breaking them in the right way, in the way that we know is right for them.
Absolutely. That was so well said. I can't say it any better myself. Very, very well said. It's just, another way to think about it is that the pitch consultant's job is not to help you win. The consultant's job is to put 4 or 5 contenders, all of whom seem worthy and qualified, in front of their client, the brand.
Right.
Not to choose one or not to lean in the way. No. So don't listen to them. They're doing their job. Your job is not to do their job, and vice versa.
Exactly.
You go in and do, as Danny just said, you go in and do what is right for the situation, for the client, and for yourself.
Well, we've certainly been on the same page during this podcast episode. I'll say that for sure. It's been such an amazing pleasure talking to you. Before we finish, I always ask my guests this. What are your final words of wisdom for people who want to be better at pitching?
I think it comes down to the idea, and this has been something that I've gotten feedback on from people, very, very senior people and junior people over the years. You have to be yourself. You must be your genuine self. And that's, again, the notion of fear that you articulated earlier. That's scary for a lot of people. They want to hide behind different personas. They want to hide behind their deck. They want to hide behind their team. It's about being yourself and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. Feeling the import of what you're doing, the emotion of what you're doing, and sharing that with the audience. If you can get to that, you can be an excellent presenter.
Brilliant words of wisdom. I couldn't agree more. Peter, thank you so much for your time. I know.
Well, if you agree, then they must be brilliant.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you again for your time. I appreciate it so very much.
Thank you for thinking of me. Thank you very much. It's really been fun. And go enjoy some ice cream.
This has been another episode of Pitch Masters. Go to pitchguy.co.uk for updates and information, or search for Pitch Guy on social media for regular videos on sales, psychology, storytelling, creativity, and much more.